I'm ready for all today, through all the pain, all the way, the fight to one for all, my life, the love, we taking it all the way,
I think my favorite thing in fantasy football is talking about players that are going to break out, because if you're right, or in my case, when I'm right, it just feels a whole lot better. Yo, what is going on, Sleeper Nation? It is Nader. We're back with another legendary episode. Of course, I am followed by the #1 Australian analyst, Sheehan. How you doing?
I'm good, I'm just super excited. It's just past midnight here, which means happy birthday to Tua Tagovailoa, a player who might come out. And I'm sure everyone's had today marked on their calendars as an auspicious occasion that we can all celebrate the day everyone's favorite left-handed quarterback turns 24.
No, I'm not celebrating that. I will be celebrating... Actually, I don't want to say celebrating, but I'll be looking forward for the day where the Dolphins move on from him. Is that a hot take?
I don't think it's a hot take among the Dolphins fan base.
That's fair. But of course, we are also joined by the co-host of the Ship Chasing podcast from NBC Sports Edge. It is Pat Kerrane. Hopefully I said your last name right. I'm not good with pronouncing it.
Yeah, that's right.
How are you doing?
It actually broke up as you said it, so I think you said it right.
Okay.
But yeah, I think
Pat nailed it.
Yeah. But thanks for being on, guys. I'm excited to talk some football.
There we go. Of course, we're going to be talking about the breakout candidates, not breakup candidates. Sorry about that. The breakout candidates, the ones that we think had a fake out, the ones that had a big year and are, of course, due to have that significant regression, and of course the never going to breakouts. I think that one's the most fun topic to talk about and justify players being in, because you just get to trash on a player, and who doesn't like doing that? Because that's my favorite thing. That's why I'm here. Of course, we're going to be talking about, like I mentioned, the breakouts, the fake outs, and the never going to make outs. Sheehan, do you have some wise words of wisdom, or a question of wise words of wisdom? Did he lag? Is he lagging? He's lagging.
I can't tell if this is a well executed bit or he's lagging.
No,
Because his eyebrows up.
I think he's lagging. No, he lagged. That's what you get for living in the UK. That's what happens. You live in the UK, you lag. I don't know.
Yep.
That's a ripperino and pepperino for him.
I'm usually the one with the internet issues, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, it feels good, doesn't it?
Else. It actually does.
Yes. This reminds me of the Call of Duty days when you're in a party chat and then somebody had an echo. I don't know if that's relatable to you.
I was more Halo than Call of Duty.
Okay.
But yeah. Call of Duty was much harder.
How?
You didn't think it was harder? I thought it was a higher skill level. For Call of Duty.
I don't know.
People knew the maps. I would just go into the room. Someone come behind me, knife me. I'm dead immediately. One hit kill.
I don't know. With Halo, I feel like headshots matter a lot more.
Yeah. Well, because if you just unload a full clip of an assault rifle, they still might survive.
Exactly. That's not happening on COD. You could have potato aim, and you still have a chance. So while we get to make fun of the lagger here, he just told me sorry. So he should be trying to fix that and then getting back on there.
All right.
I'll let you make fun of him for it.
Well, as bad as it gets on ship chasing, it's normally my video that gets really bad on ship chasing, but I don't. It's been weeks at least, maybe months since I've actually had to drop off the stream. So this is pretty bad.
Let's see. There you go. I'll let you prepare a UK joke and how it's trash over there, and you can execute it. I've done it too many times. It's your turn.
I'm not sure I have a UK joke, but
Come on, help me out here. Oh my god.
should we get started or?
We'll give him a second. Yeah. We'll be nice. I've debated this a couple of times where if he lags, I just keep going and then hope he jumps in. But no, we'll be nice.
Okay.
So how's your day?
It was actually very good. I got a lot of writing done. Took my dog to his first his like daycare meet and greet because he just got neutered. So he's like, we can actually start taking him to daycare now.
Really? Yeah.
And he just played for 2 hours. I when I went to pick him up, the guy was like, he literally never stopped. Just played for the entire 2 hours.
You have to get neutered in order to go to daycare?
You do in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Ah.
Because they're not yeah, they're just not dealing with the risk.
It sounds like a lot of effort to go through.
Yeah, I mean it was luckily he's done now. He healed very quickly. But it was definitely, like it was a solid week plus of him like wearing this like pseudocol thing that's like, because you could wear the cone, but he hated the cone, so they make this thing like that just like is like a little suit, it's like a little onesie. So he wore that for a week or 10 days.
When does a dog need to go to a daycare?
It's mostly so that we can board him is why we're getting him set up. I'm trying to, like if we go away for the weekend or something, we could just leave him there.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah, but in season it'd be really nice. Like there's certain days like where I have a lot of writing to get done or I have a podcast. He's actually at my feet right now. He's being cool. But normally in the like mid afternoon, like I have a 4:00 podcast. Now he'll be like, I'll prep him. I'll take him for a walk. I'll like make sure he has water. I'll let him outside right before the podcast, and then he's a nightmare during the podcast. He like times it. So I think I'm gonna put him in daycare when I have pods.
So how you doing over there, Sheehan?
Yeah, great. It's been a while since that's happened.
Yeah, actually,
a regular feature of early last season.
I blame the UK.
So, sorry about that.
Are we taking from the top or how are we doing it?
Well, let's see. No, I'll just find a spot and just keep going.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So before we get into, of course, the rest of the episode, I want to remind everybody to follow SleeperWire Show on Twitter at SleeperWire Show, obviously, so you never miss any type of articles that comes out with our phenomenal writing crew. Of course, whatever podcast we come up with, when it gets uploaded, of course, you guys want to be there and ready for that. And of course, the live shows with the awesome team that we currently have. All right. So Sheehan. So
yes.
Pat, we got a handful of players, a nice phenomenal list, might I add. And of course, you mentioned the birthday boy or the potential birthday boy of Tua. I'm not going to pretend to know how to say his last name, so I'm not going to. He tops my list. And I'm going to start it with you, Pat. Is he a breakout, fake out? Well, he never broke out, so he can't be a fake out. But is he a never going to make out?
I actually think he's a breakout. He was quarterback 10 in completion percentage over expected in 2021. And we know the issues with Tua. He is accurate, but he throws underneath too much. I think that having a guy who's very accurate with this new system could be very effective. We could get a lot more out of that accuracy now that we have Daniel there. And we also had a really bad offensive line for the Dolphins last year. Really bad. And if a quarterback's not throwing deep a bunch and his offensive line is terrible, I think it's reasonable to expect that if the offensive line improves, he might be willing to challenge deep a little bit more often. So I'm not saying they're going to have a good offensive line next year, but if it's just not terrible, we could see a step forward in his downfield throwing. And then we should see better offensive design so that we can get more of that accuracy. Jimmy Garoppolo was quarterback 18 in completion percentage over expected. He was between Lamar Jackson and Jared Goff last year. So you can get a lot out of accuracy with this San Francisco 49ers style system. I think, he's not going to be like an elite quarterback, But I do think we should see a significant step forward this year.
Now, I'm trying to think. Okay, I'm looking at the potential opportunities for Tua and how he could break out. So first, he needs the wide receivers, and he's got a pretty solid core. He's got a nice tight end, solid receivers, nice Jalen Waddle hanging out there. Running game, it's average at best. I think it's probably under par. Maybe it's better for Tua because considering he'd have to throw more or use his legs a little bit more often. But I'd like to see it maybe a little bit more balanced running game. And of course, like you mentioned, the offensive line being a little bit on the lackluster side. Right now, as I look at the potential draft, I see, of course, they have the 26th pick, the one they got from the Niners, I believe, and then 50th in the second round, and then a couple of compensation picks. So they would probably have to spend their first rounder on a offensive lineman. Would you consider that realistic, or do you think they would go somewhere else?
I don't know if they're going to draft a lineman. I'm not sure, honestly, about how strong the lineman class is. But the line was so bad that, if they get any help in free agency, they had anything in the first, second, even third rounds, it should help some. I just think they need to be able to protect him a little bit. And it was also very bad in terms of run blocking the offensive line. So, I think that you could see just an overall improvement in the offense if they get that sorted at all. You also do have, the Shanahan style zone blocking system coming in, and we would assume so. Maybe they're able to get more out of the same guys if they fit that system better. I'm not sure, but it's kind of one of those things where an offensive line is as bad as their offensive line was in both pass blocking and run blocking. The NFL is a volatile league. We could just see things swing the other way a little bit, and that would really help Tua in terms of if he is willing to throw downfield at all, getting him to that level. And I do think it could be kind of like a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where he's not throwing downfield much, but when he is, it's kind of like well schemed, well timed. The play call is set up well for that play. So, it's building off a play they ran earlier. Now he's hitting a guy open deep, that type of stuff. So I think we'll see some more of that. I'm not sure exactly how they get there with the offensive line, but they don't honestly have to do all that much.
That's something I think I will be looking towards fairly heavily. If they spend free agency or somewhere in the draft on the offensive line, I'd be willing to buy into that offense. But right now, I'm a little bit skeptical. But what about you, Sheehan?
I think you sort of hit the nail on the head in terms of we need to see a bit more from him downfield. It's almost you want to see him at least keep the defense honest, almost in the same way that teams would throw once upon a time just so they could run the ball easier. You want him to be able to take the top off the defense every now and then just so they need to be aware of it. I think time is not on Tua's side. And I don't mean that just because, with each passing birthday, you start to I guess, reassess the slow march of time. But he's a guy who needs mastery in a system and a mastery in an offense. We've now seen him in a less than helpful system to him as he's developing. McDaniel is going to take some time to embed what he's about. And I don't think time is what he have. We've seen reports that the Dolphins are interested in Sean Payton and Tom Brady for next season. I think that is ridiculous. But this ownership, I could see getting agitated if they don't see improvement out of him. Now, I think he's got the weapons around him to do it. I think McDaniel's system will be better for him. They'll open up the game a bit more with his legs. But he kind of is what he is. He's not going to be an air raid quarterback. He is your death by a million cuts kind of quarterback, and that's absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned. In terms of improving that offensive line, maybe they open up the checkbook for Teron Armstead, give him a bit of protection. There's obviously would be Tua's right tackle instead of left tackle. Maybe they use pick 28 and Tyler Linderbaum at a nice center there, and they need to rebuild that line. We saw the wonders it did for Kansas City, and we saw the value that I guess the Bengals hoped they would have in the Super Bowl. So I hope they don't leave him high and dry. I think it's fair to say that he hasn't broken out yet. It's definitely not a fake out in my opinion. But I think the breakout is coming if they are patient with him. Whether that happens this year or next, I think remains to be seen. But hopefully he hits career high numbers. He's never thrown more than 2,600 yards and 16 touchdowns. So if he hits, let's say, 35 and 25, the kind of numbers that Mackie Jones was putting up this year, then I'd say that's a good year from Tua.
All right, that's fair enough on the Tua side. Let's move on to Jerry Jeudy. He's a little bit more interesting of a character because I don't want to say he has a bust label on him, but right now I think Jalen Reagor is outproducing him. Sheehan, I'll start off with you.
Yeah, this one hurts because I quite like Jerry Jeudy as a player. Everything was pointing to him having a breakout season this year, and it just didn't happen for him. Theoretically, he should have been a really good fit for Teddy or at least a better fit for Teddy compared to Courtland Sutton. But it was really kind of Tim Patrick who stood up for Denver. Only managed, he's still at 90 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 3 touchdowns in his career. You know, that's a below average Julio Jones season from back in the day. So I'd like to say it's still coming, but certainly the odds are against him. The third-year breakout kind of is a thing of the past, even for receivers.
What has to change for Jerry Jeudy to be fantasy relevant?
Well, I think kind of everything that has changed.
He needs a quarterback.
That's it.
I mean, he needs a quarterback. He's been playing with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock. I mean, that's terrible. I mean, not only has he been playing with bad quarterbacks, but he's been playing in a low-volume passing offense, a run-first offense, run-heavy offense, and not a particularly well-designed offense. So I think we're being too hard on Jerry Jeudy because he was drafted very highly last year. We got excited. We loved him as a prospect. Year 2 breakout. Let's go. Doesn't happen. That's going to lead to kind of a backlash, especially this time of year where, you know, a lot of the drafts are based on how we felt about their 2021 season. We haven't really seen much of the projections ramp up. So, and we don't even know who their quarterback's going to be. If they get a quarterback, I think he could be a league winner. Like Jerry Jeudy has a huge ceiling if they get a quarterback. He's a very strong prospect. He had a 2.95 yards per route run at Alabama over his career. Extremely efficient. We know his production wasn't quite what we wanted in terms of yardage share, touchdown share, et cetera, at Alabama. But we also know the massive extenuating circumstances at that program in terms of trying to dominate the offense with Devonta Smith and Jalen Waddle and Henry Ruggs all there. So, you know, the efficiency, I think, really is important. Plus the draft position, plus the scouting report on him was just off the charts. He's a great route runner. He was terrific after the catch in college. He's had 1.72 yards. He's had 1.72 yards per route run as a pro over the course of his career. Again, that's with Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. That's a pretty good mark. That's like a very solid NFL wide receiver mark. It's not elite. It's not like the type of mark that would lead you to believe that we have an impending breakout coming. But we do have a new coaching staff. We should see a more pass-first offense, a better designed offense. And if we just get some kind of decent quarterback play in there, I do think that he could take a big leap. And it's kind of like, in some ways, it's similar to the Dolphins offensive line situation where it's like we're already at the low end of like the range of possibilities in terms of the quarterback play. So, you know, almost anything would be a big improvement. Like Jimmy Garoppolo would be a big improvement here. You know, just anyone kind of competent, I think, would really help, given that we already have a coaching staff change that should lead to, you know, not just more passing, but more optimal passing, more passing on 1st and 10. The offense built around the pass in a sharper way. So, you know, maybe it won't be the most fast-paced offense or anything, but I do think we should see some more volume. And ultimately, I think we should be patient with a really strong prospect who has been good but not great so far in his NFL career.
Let's see.
I 100% agree that he could be a league winner next year, and he's a guy that I will be snapping up in the mid-rounds because I think that's where he's going to be. Maybe even nudging the 10th round. Which seems like obscene value for a guy of his skills. He's only going to be 23 as well. So he's another guy with time on his side. Another year removed from that injury. If he can sort out his catching issues, which to me seem mental more than technical, It's kind of all signs pointing up for Jerry Jeudy.
But we have to look at the quarterback situation and be a little bit realistic. So who could they get that would significantly improve the situation that they could realistically grab? So right now,
we
there's
know
Jimmy Garoppolo.
the answer that everyone wants.
Aaron Rodgers, of course. We'll just throw Aaron Rodgers out there. I mean, other than Jimmy Garoppolo, Kirk Cousins, maybe. I don't know if Vikings can realistically replace him. But I mean, of course, that would be a great improvement. But I don't see that likely. I think them getting Aaron Rodgers is more likely than them getting Kirk Cousins. Other than that, is there any other quarterback that you realistically see that would be an upgrade?
I think most quarterbacks would be an upgrade.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But which ones?
Jameis Winston would be an upgrade. Like you can't really like downgrade. You can't really downgrade. It's been terrible. The other thing is that there's potentially going to be 5 first-round quarterbacks in this class. I know that most people aren't excited about this rookie quarterback class, and I get it because no one can really figure out like which quarterbacks are actually going to be good here because we'll probably see a bunch of busts in this class. So that's not maybe the most like high probability way to improve the quarterback play, but we're generally not very good at projecting which first-round quarterbacks are going to be good versus which first-round quarterbacks are going to be bad. You know, Justin Herbert, for example, Josh Allen. Deshaun Watson was not a particularly popular guy among fantasy players when he came in. Patrick Mahomes went like 10th, right? So it's not that, you know, any one of these guys is going to be a star, but I do think that we're kind of discounting the fact that we're probably going to see 3, 4, maybe 5 first-round quarterbacks in this class. If the Broncos land one of them, I think even though it's a rookie quarterback, we could still see that be enough of an improvement for Jeudy to break out because Judy's entering his 3rd season. He could kind of take a step forward on his own and then just get just kind of anything approaching league average quarterback play. Like a Mac Jones type of season for this team would be huge for Jerry Jeudy.
Mm-hmm. And here's some proper this time of year scouting or this time of year narrative you can get into. Kenny Pickett played with Jordan Addison at Pitt, who is a similar type player to Jerry Jeudy. They're that kind of 6'1", 200 pounds, inside alpha receiver. If he was to go to Denver, I could easily see Jeudy being his number 1 guy. Now, I think that's a fairly spurious way of projecting fantasy production, but you don't have to squint to see it.
Quarterbacks are, I mean, right now, quarterbacks are incredibly unpopular. I should say rookie quarterbacks are incredibly unpopular, but as soon as the combine starts, we start getting to the draft process. Usually quarterbacks tend to rise above draft boards just because of the hype and the position value that they come in. So of course that's going to have to be a wait and see, which I don't like. I don't like wait and see scenarios because obviously then you have to wait and see. And that's no fun. We like having our takes, being for sure with it, and then being able to actually accurately make a decision. Now, somebody that we might be able to would be right now Brandon Ayuk, who is a little bit more on the interesting side because he felt like he was, 1,000-yard receiver his rookie year, became absolutely droppable midway through last year, and then he became a very, I don't want to say serviceable, but he became a nice little flex star, a little spot star type of player towards the end. Pat, we'll start off with you on how you feel about Brandon Ayuk, assuming for the sake of keeping it consistent, we will assume that Trey Lance is the quarterback.
Yeah, I feel much less strongly about Brandon Ayuk than Jerry Jeudy because like the situation might be worse for Brandon Ayuk in terms of overall play volume. I know that the 49ers were a run heavy team in 2021. It's not like they're going to lose a ton of passing volume moving to Trey Lance, but they could lose significant passing volume moving to Trey Lance. So not that has me worried so much, but I don't know that that's fully baked into the ADPs of the 49ers right now. You know, you're seeing Deebo Samuel in these best ball drafts going in the early second. George Kittle's getting drafted very highly. And Brandon Ayuk, I think maybe his ADP could come down a little bit as the projections have their say because there's not going to be that many targets to go around. I assume like Juwan Jennings has to get some, so you're kind of looking at once the target shares get parceled out in the projections. I do think that Brandon Ayuk could come at a better price down the line, but I'm still buying right now. I still would like some exposure right now. I think he was a very strong prospect, good fit for the system, a yards after catch type of player. He can do all the stuff that Debo can do. Not as good as Debo, but he can be used, on that shallow stuff. He was as a rookie. He was used when Debo was hurt in a very Debo-esque way, but he can also be a deep threat for that team. And maybe if Lance takes a step forward, particularly in throws down the field, where we saw that he's not doing exactly what Garoppolo was doing in terms of being as efficient and as accurate over the middle on those kind of crossing routes and that type of stuff. But he was more willing to go deep, more willing to, make more difficult throws. I think that could be good for Brandon Ayuk. And he has 1.71 yards per route run since entering the league, just 0.01 behind Judy. He's actually been pretty good, even including last year, which was a disappointment, but he kind of salvaged it toward the end, to your point. So I don't feel as strongly about Ayuk, but I would still pick him as a breakout rather than a never going to make it.
Mm-hmm. I am a little bit more interested in Brandon Ayuk just because I feel like we've seen him at his worst. We've seen the worst, and it was pretty bad. It was really bad, actually. But we've also seen what he could do when he is a lot more consistent and a lot more on the upside. So that being said, I would like to have some Brandon Ayuk shares. I think his ADP is going to falter because of all the offensive weapons that he has, or that team has, especially Debo and George Kittle. We might as well talk about those two because I think those are also interesting characters to discuss. I think, just to lay it out right now, I think Debo is going to be one of those fake out type of players. I think George Kittle is also a fake out type of player where I think they will not give you the value that their ADP had, or the amount you spent in draft capital for them will not return you that initial investment. I think Brandon Ayuk will return that ADP investment, if not beat it, because ADP for Brandon Ayuk right now, of course, it's not out or a consistent number, but I would assume it's probably around the 7th to 8th round in a redraft league. That's not that bad of an investment for Brandon Ayuk, because if it fails, it's not ideal, but it's not going to ruin your fantasy team. But Debo Samuel having probably a projected 3rd to late 2nd round ADP, if he fails, that really significantly hurts your team. I would rather not put myself in that position. So
he's going like late, almost late first. Right? He's not going late first, but he's on that like 1-2 turn occasionally, and usually very early in the second. So I actually think that late 2nd, early 3rd could be where he ends up once projections come in, and then I'm much more interested. But I agree with you. I think he's pretty risky right now. Mm-hmm. I still want some exposure, but I think he's a bit risky.
Mm-hmm. Now, he is an injury-prone player. There were multiple times throughout the year where he was a game-time decision. In the last few years where he has played, he has missed a handful of games. When he is healthy, he is incredibly productive. It's just difficult to gauge health on an injury-prone player. Sheehan, is your mic muted? Are you good to go?
Yeah, good to go, Matt.
There we go. Alrighty. So if you have any opinions, I guess you can cut and splice it here.
Yeah, look, I think Brandon Ayuk at this stage is a fake out with an eye on breakout. The numbers look good, but it just doesn't feel right. And I think there's so much of deciding whether someone's broken out or not is the kind of gut feel. I tend to agree that if he's in those middle rounds, I want Brandon Ayuk. I like the big play potential. If, as you say, Debo misses time, Kittle misses time, he's the focal point of that offense. Would be nice to see him, catch 70 passes, go over 1,000 yards, and have another couple of scores. Maybe with Trey Lance, they open up that offense a little bit more. But I guess that remains to be seen. Apologies if you asked this already. Would you rather Ayuk or Judy?
I did not ask that, but I'd rather go Ayuk. Well, it depends. If they have identical ADPs where, it's just back-to-back, I would rather go Ayuk. If it's Judy having a significantly lower ADP, I'd rather have Judy.
Yeah, this is
I
a
think
take,
Judy will
take the
probably be
cheaper
more
guy.
expensive.
Really? Oh.
I'd kind of be happy with both as my like wide receiver. I don't know. We're going to talk endlessly about me wanting to go wide receiver heavy this year. But if these guys were my wide receiver, let's say 4 and 5, Judy and Ayuk, with the potential for them both to be wide receiver 2s or better, then I'm fairly happy with that.
Well, that
Pulling
means
up a
you
best
went,
ball draft I'm in. Brandon Ayuk went 609 and Jared Judy went 612.
so that basically, so right now, as of right now, and that's probably assuming that Bridgewater is still the quarterback.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. If it changes at quarterback, it'll significantly change his ADP. Say, for example, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback, he probably jumps to maybe a 4th rounder. Is that a high?
That's why I think Judy's such a smash right now because
Mhm.
you're getting a huge discount on the quarterback change potential, and even if we don't have a quarterback change, or I think we're going to get some kind of quarterback change, but let's say we don't get a huge quarterback upgrade, I still think he's like at a slight discount to Brandon Ayuk. Pretty good pick.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's fair. Now we talked about Debo for a hot second. He will be a much more interesting topic as redraft season approaches. But George Kittle, I want to mention him real fast. And for the past few years, I always recommend people not take him. There are 3 tight ends that you should be looking at if you would like to take one in the early rounds. I know there's a lot of people, it's very divided whether you take a tight end early, tight end late, or nothing in between. George Kittle follows in the in-between status right now, where I think everybody should be avoiding him. He's too injury prone, first of all, inconsistent, and just too many question marks in that offense, and especially without Garoppolo. He has failed to match up to his ADP. I think 3 years in a row, and people are still drafting him in the what is it now, the 4th round, 3rd round. There are better tight ends for you to scoop up and have more consistent play. I'm not too big on George Kittle right now.
It's very nice.
I think George Kittle's the best tight end in the league.
Yes,
he is absolutely elite.
I will agree with you, but fantasy production,
you're taking on injury risk when you draft an early round tight end. That's kind of part of it's sort of like drafting an early round running back, where you are taking on increased injury risk by going to that position instead of wide receiver. But I think that when you hit on that early round tight end, it gives you a bigger advantage most of the time, unless you hit just an absolute smash type of running back, than when you take a running back. So I like taking early round running backs or early round tight ends. I mean, and I think Kittle is an awesome pick right now where he's going. You can get him in the 4th round in these best ball drafts. You're getting a discount on him. He's kind of falling into like the Mark Andrews territory from last year, similar to TJ Hawkinson. He is a far better player than TJ Hawkinson. And, when you can get that kind of talent in like the 4th round, late 3rd round, 4th round, I've gotten him in the late 4th round, George Kittle. So I'm hammering him right now. I'm willing to take on the injury risk. I'm willing to take on the inconsistency, which I do agree will be a feature of his production profile because, this is not going to be an offense that's consistently throwing, but we saw last year, like when he is the guy for that week in terms of the game plan, he can just explode. And, particularly in these best ball tournament type of setups, I mean, if you get enough out of him in the regular season, you might just absolutely need to have George Kittle to win a tournament this year.
Mm-hmm. Sheehan?
I tend to agree with you there, Nader. I love George Kittle. I think he's a fantastic player. I love watching him play. I love that he is good at everything a tight end needs to do. I kind of just want someone else to take that risk, and I'm happy to miss on him to not have him ruin my team. That said, I do have him on quite a few dynasty teams, and I'm very happy to have him.
Oh, that's nice.
I will say there are players you do not want to go against in fantasy. George Kittle is one of them. Like going against, like a couple years ago, it was Young Hoiku. When you saw him on the other team, you did not want to go against him because he was putting up at least 15 points in the kicker position. And this year it was kind of like Jonathan Taylor type of person, Dalvin Cook, where they could win the week specifically just by themselves.
Debo, Cooper
Debo,
Kupp.
exactly. Cooper Kupp, Debo this year. But George Kittle is kind of like one of those players where when you see him on the opposing lineup that week, you're kind of like wincing a little bit, going, ugh, that's not, that could be real bad for me. And that I will definitely give it to George Kittle. But let's move on to another little polarizing figure in Michael Pittman Jr. Now, this one, I think a lot of people have a lot of passionate speeches on this player because a lot of people are so invested in him. But Pat, I'll give you the floor right now.
I've been skeptical on Pittman since he entered the league. I don't think he was a particularly good prospect. Obviously, he had good draft capital, but in terms of basically every metric that I like, he didn't do well in it. And so I'm still skeptical. He's been solid since he's been a pro. He's been better than I thought he would be. But I don't know that they really have that strong of a chance of upgrading their quarterback. They're talking about moving on from Carson Wentz, but Carson Wentz wasn't that bad last year. He was not good, but he wasn't terrible. So it's kind of one of those things where like they actually do need to find somehow like a legit quarterback upgrade because they weren't at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the quarterback play last year. And I think the more likely scenario is that they're able to upgrade their wide receiver core. And Pittman has really benefited, I think, from, T.Y. Hilton on his last legs and really no one else there. He's been able to soak up targets. He's definitely a better player than I thought he'd be. He's a more complete player. They're able to use him deep. They're able to use him in the intermediate areas. So there's not really such a knock on Pittman, but I do think he's been in a pretty good situation from a target competition perspective. Not a great situation from a quarterback play perspective, but I don't really see how that gets upgraded in a meaningful way. So I would put him as a fake out.
How about you, Sheehan?
Yeah, 100% agree. Fake out. I think a lot of the damage he did this year was volume based. I don't like the fact he doesn't really separate. He's the contested catch guy that you don't really want to see. And as you say, they're not going to find someone better than Carson Wentz. It's easy to upgrade on a Teddy Bridgewater, and they might even go from Carson Wentz to Teddy Bridgewater. Their quarterback room is going to take a step back this year, and I understand why. And maybe it is Wentz ends up in Denver, and that's good news for those people over there, Cortland Sutton especially.
Oh yeah,
but I think Pittman's going to be like a cut price Michael Thomas in that it's just volume, and he's nowhere near the player that Thomas is. So I'm not really interested in him.
I'm putting him as the never gonna breakout candidate. I think once they get another wide receiver, like you mentioned, Pat, if they just get one more halfway decent receiver, I think his fantasy production takes a absolute nosedive. I don't want him. I don't want him at all. I don't want that offense at all, other than Jonathan Taylor. I think that is it when it comes to a fantasy perspective on that offense.
I think it could be a little like it's a completely different type of player, but a little bit like Tyler Boyd, where we got excited about Tyler Boyd when he was like the only guy there, and then as soon as someone who's like a legitimate talent in T. Higgins and then an elite talent in Jamar Chase gets added, it's like the guy who's a solid NFL player kind of gets pushed down the depth chart, down the target tree. So I do think that Pittman is at risk if they add like a very strong player. He would immediately be the secondary option. And I think he could be kind of a 1A, 1B situation if they had someone solid.
Fair enough. So we're all in agreement that he may not be exactly who we thought he was, and they let him off the hook. So Van Jefferson, I think he's interesting because he's just buried down the depth chart. That's it. He got OBJ if he comes back, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, then you have Van Jefferson. It's not like any of those options are leaving anytime soon. Maybe OBJ. But Van Jefferson just buried down the depth chart. And I remember a couple years ago when he first came out and Brandon Cooks was still on that team, I said, anybody who takes Van Jefferson is in for a rude awakening because he's going to be buried. He's going to be depth chart buried his whole career. And it looks like it might be the case. Yeah, he made a couple big plays in some moments where he did get playing time opportunity, but you also have to remember during the Super Bowl, I believe they put number 18. I can't even remember his name. He had one of those hockey last names where there's 9 letters, no vowels, and it's impossible to pronounce.
Ben Skowronek, is that you're talking?
I'm not going to try to because I don't know how. And of course, he had that little Super Bowl play where the ball went through his hands and then got picked off. He got playing time over Van Jefferson, for crying out loud. So if that's going to be the case, when? I just want to know when.
Never.
It's
never happening. We can't say he's like the worst second round pick in memory because Dwayne Eskridge was a second round pick, but he was a very bad second round pick. The Rams really should not have spent a second round pick on this guy. He's not been good since he's been in the league. Weirdly, he's a deep threat for this offense, but he's not fast. Like, he profiled as kind of a good route runner, a guy like a reliable wide receiver, kind of like a pro, like a immediate pro. That's why he's old, So I don't know. Again, they shouldn't have taken him, but I think that's why they took him, because they felt like they could just plug him right in. And to some extent, that has been true. They have been able to plug him in, but it's kind of like plugging in, like a Byron Pringle or something. Like, you're not getting that much out of this guy. Really isn't the right guy for this deep threat role, which is how they use him. They actually changed Odell Beckham's role when he joined the team. He was also kind of a deep threat, and they brought him into kind of a more intermediate type of role right before, basically through the end of the season until, the Super Bowl. And Van Jefferson just continually operated as a deep threat, which they should really bring in someone with speed for that role. You do have Tutu Atwell there, who did absolutely nothing as a rookie and probably doesn't have the size to operate as a downfield threat, even though he is quite fast. So Van Jefferson will probably run a bunch of routes this year, but I expect him to just be like terrible in yards per out run, because we're going to get Robert Woods coming back for the second half of, hopefully full strength by the second half of the season. Could see Odell Beckham back, although it probably a lost season for him with the ACL tear that late. So there should be plenty of routes for Van Jefferson, but I'm still not that interested.
Mm-hmm. I think he'll be running a lot of clear out routes, a lot of decoy routes, a lot of dummy routes. That's where I realistically see him. He's going to be like, what's his name? Gerald Everett, where, you feel like, or Tyler Higbee, where you felt like they were really going to break out. And other than Higbee's like 3 touchdown game that he had, I believe, a year ago or 2 years ago, he's not going to do too much.
He's slow Jalen Guyton.
There you go. Sheehan, you look like you really wanted to say something.
Yeah, totally agree. He's being misused. He's Robert Woods. He's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Comes in, does what you need him to do, but he needs to be used in that role. Ironically, I would say Dwayne Eskridge would be better for the Rams for that role that they want to use Van Jefferson in, despite the fact he's not much of a player as far as I'm concerned. So I've not really got any interest in Van Jefferson. If he was younger, he's a guy I'd be looking to buy at the end of this season with an eye on where he lands in free agency. But he's going to be 28 by the time he hits free agency, and I'm not sure teams are going to pay up for him.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's being misused. Totally agree on Tutu Atwell. That kind of vertical slot guy doesn't stick around too much. Like a Taylor Gabriel.
Mm-hmm.
So no real interest. Like Van Jefferson, but I don't think he's ever going to be fantasy relevant.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I may have a bias here because I just thought he was such a bad draft pick. And the point you just made about, him being kind of that Amon-Ra St. Brown type of guy. I mean, what if they put like Skowronek or someone else in the Van Jefferson role this year? Like, is there a chance that with Woods still recuperating, with, let's say, Beckham's not back, could he play kind of that Woods Beckham role? And then are we more interested?
He might have a temporary
100%.
role. He might have a temporary relevant role just due to injury. In that case, yes. But the Rams, like their owner said, F them picks. So they might get rid of those picks now and just trade for another wide receiver. And then he's just going to take over that Van Jefferson role. I mean, you mentioned that the Rams need a speedy receiver. Deshaun Jackson maybe comes back again and he actually sticks with the team. I highly doubt that. But
Emmanuel Sanders,
something like that. I mean, I don't expect
exactly
him to be
speedy.
on the Bills. No, but he might fit that OBJ type role when he's not there, that Robert Woods type role. They will get a wide receiver if they feel like Robert Woods is not going to be there at the beginning of the season, which he probably won't. They will get another wide receiver, whether they draft one, whether they take one in free agency. That's just how the team operates. That it won them a Super Bowl. There's no way they're going to change from that formula now, and they will replace Van Jefferson with another type of player. But for the sake of argument, Robert Woods is 29 right now. He turns 30 on April 10th, which is a month and a half away. Cooper Kupp is 28. Odell Beckham's 29. So there is a chance. I'll say there is a chance that, how should I say it? He gets an opportunity. How about that?
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Fair. There we go. All right. So let's move on from Van Jefferson. He's not important enough to actually, maybe he is important enough to take up this much time. I'll tell you who isn't just important enough to take up this much time. Denzel Mims. He's never going to pay. He's just never. That's it. He had a chance. He had like 3 games to give it a chance, but no, he didn't. And then the new regime, it's just how the story goes. The new regime comes in, they pick their guys, and he's not one of their guys. Just like when the Cardinals came in with Josh Rosen, and then all of a sudden, new regime, they just get rid of him. Now they have Kyler Murray. Same thing with Denzel Mims. They drafted him to fit the scheme that he was expected to play on that team. That's not there anymore. He's irrelevant, in my opinion.
He had less than 200 routes last year. He was fully healthy. I think, you want to talk about free agency. In 2024, maybe we get him on a 1-year contract. He's like a Brashad Perriman type. He's just a pure deep threat. Get a couple deep shots. We start to get excited again. But until then, I'm completely out.
Yes, he is exactly what people wanted out of. No, hold on. The opposite. He is Elijah Moore and what people wanted out of him. Did I say that right?
I guess. Depends on the point.
You know what I meant. You guys know what I meant. You guys know. Sheehan go.
I reckon there should be a guy at the combine this week that whenever they get excited about a big guy running a time, they just hold up a big sign of Denzel Mims and tap it for the coach and the GM. He's your workout warrior.
Credit to the NFL though, did not go in the first round, and there was talk that he would.
He's 59th overall. To a team with a lot of holes on their roster.
Little credit.
Yeah, look, he's going to be there on the Jets. The Jets have to be better. Zach Wilson has to be better. Zach Wilson throws a nice deep ball, whether you like him or not.
Love him.
I mean, I've got no interest in Denzel Mims. I'm not going to talk anyone into it. Certainly not going to talk myself into him. But this time of year, he's liable to be on your waivers in a dynasty league. I think there's worse lotto tickets to hold. I don't think it's ever going to happen. But big, deep threat with a guy who can kind of hurl it. Whatever.
I'd rather have an expired lotto ticket than Denzel Mims. Like, I already know the lotto ticket lost. I would still rather have that than Denzel Mims. There's less disappointment.
What draft pick would you trade any? Like, if you had a 4th round draft pick, would you trade it for Mims?
No.
5th round?
Yeah, maybe a 5th. It would depend who's left on the board. If I looked and thought I could take a lottery throw at a Jareth Stearns or a Denzel Mims, then I'll probably take Jareth Stearns. I don't really like him that much.
Yeah, it's rough. It's a tough scene for Denzel Mims.
Okay, so let's see. I just looked on my dynasty roster. Okay, so I have Tyler Bass as my kicker. I would rather have Tyler Bass than Denzel Mims.
Oh yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Javian Hawkins. I'd rather have him than Denzel Mims.
I would rather have Denzel Mims. I think.
Tyson Williams. Actually, you know what? Maybe
Denzel
I'd
Mims.
rather have Mims. Maybe I'd rather have Denzel Mims because we've seen what Tyson Williams can do, and he got benched. So that may be.
He got benched, and there's 2 running backs coming back from injury that are going to be ahead
exactly.
Of him, so.
Yeah.
Mims shouldn't be on the waiver wire in a league like that. I don't think.
No. Let's see. I have the Bengals defense. I'd rather have them.
I'd rather have the Detroit defense.
Oh. Okay, there we go. I think that's enough. I don't think I have to insult Denzel Mims anymore. I think that did it all.
I would rather be a Jets fan than have Denzel Mims.
Wow.
Yes.
Come on. That's
Yes.
not true. That's not
Yes.
true.
I would rather do that. All right. So
I live in New York, and I can tell you that is a bad choice. You are making a mistake.
as he's wearing a Patriots jersey, he goes out.
That's all right. My
Yeah.
family are all Jets fans. Like, I get it.
Well, you know what? We don't have to like our family. So Zach Moss.
Eh.
He's just there. You know, he's that guy. He's just there. How do we feel about him? Let's start with Pat.
I don't even know what this contingent value is. I mean, we saw them give Devin Singletary all the snaps. I don't think that was like a day ball type of thing. You know, now that he's gone, Zach Moss has a second life. I mean, they have Dorsey. They kept Dorsey. That we're going to get, you know, I think we're going to get basically the exact same offense that we had last year, maybe some subtle tweaks. And I don't really see Moss making a comeback, even if Singletary goes down. I mean, this past year, they seemed more interested in Matt Breida, or just as interested. If they add any kind of running back this offseason, and, you know, there's some guys that they could bring in as depth, I think that Moss could end up being a healthy scratch for all of 2022, you know, and that they add, it's not a deep rookie class at all. So that is definitely fortunate for, you know, any Zach Moss dynasty managers, but I still think that he's in a really difficult spot with uncertain contingency value. He's not one of the guys that I'm prioritizing in best ball drafts. It's not that he can't do anything, but he's really behind the 8 ball right now.
It's difficult for him because that offense has difficulty running the ball, whether that's because maybe just the running back talent isn't there, which, I mean, I guess says a lot for Zach Moss, or maybe that offensive scheme isn't set up. Maybe the offensive line just has difficulty run blocking. He is unproductive, and there were moments in the year where he was a healthy scratch, and those were the moments where Matt Breida kind of had those miniature games where he had kind of like 2 receptions and 2 touchdowns somehow. That being said, I don't necessarily see a way Zach Moss becomes fantasy relevant in a consistent manner without injury happening in front of him, or they'd have to completely invest their assets into him. And I don't think he's worth any investment of assets on a offensive side. I think he is just there, and he either fits a system or he doesn't. He's not worth investing or working around. So I would not like to have Zach Moss on any of my rosters. Sheehan?
Yeah, if I could go into a player editor on like a Madden and make Zach Moss slightly taller, I would be more interested in him. I think he and Devin Singletary are like a thunder and lightning combination, where the thunder is a dull thud and lightning is a guy switching on and off the light really quickly.
That's kind of scary, though.
Moss is meant to be that vertical runner. I just don't think he has the size. He's not big enough to be a goal line back, and Josh Allen kind of is anyway. Not the same that Cam Newton was, but like he's going to punch it in more often than Zach Moss. So I'm not really interested. As you say, it's kind of a weak class. I don't think he's going to get retired on the back of this. But what did he play? He played 13 games this year. I would take the under if I set the line at 13.
There's also some Thunder guys that they could look into. Like, I don't know if they brought in Deontay Foreman or something. That's an actual Thunder, you know? And the other thing with Moss is that he's very shifty, but he's not been that good as a pass catcher, which is one of the things I liked about him as a prospect. I thought, you know, maybe he could get used as a 3-down guy. He's definitely undersized, but that hasn't materialized at all. And Devin Singletary has actually shown quite well as a pass catcher this past year in particular. That's why he was able to handle all the snaps, and they just handed the backfield off to him entirely. So I don't even think it would take much for Moss to be in trouble if they do anything in free agency.
There are running backs that I'm interested in, like Josh Allen. I'd rather much have him and put him in my running back slot if that was available than to have Zach Moss on my lineup. I mean, like Sheehan, like you mentioned, he is the goal line back. So you have to think about it from a fantasy perspective. What are the chances that he becomes fantasy relevant, or how does he become fantasy relevant? Is he going to get yards? Is he going to get receptions? Yards, you know, from receptions, touchdowns. none of them are consistent and none of them look like they're realistically going to happen. So if none of them are going to happen, then what are the chances that he becomes fantasy relevant? And that just becomes difficult to justify. So I think that's where we leave Zach Moss in the never going to break out to, yeah, that's probably the era I'm putting him in. But somebody that I already think they've broken out, Gabriel Davis. I like him. I think everybody should be buying into him, whatever his ADP is. Take him around earlier. I think everybody should be going out and getting him. Sheehan, we'll start off with you.
I am beyond sick of talking about Gabe Davis to the point where I don't even know why I put him on this list.
Did, so.
I had to sit through a season of people going, "Oh, this is the week for Gabe Davis. Oh, this is the week for Gabe Davis." And let's be 100% accurate here. He's had 70 catches in 2 seasons. There are 35 receptions in each season. He's had 599 yards and 549 yards. And he's caught 13 touchdowns. He's overproducing for the work that he's getting. Like, he's a tight end putting up tight end numbers, but playing wide receiver. So, excellent finish to the season. A guy that I'm totally interested in as a concept. I don't want to pay the price to get him because I think he's going to be overvalued for the production we've seen. So, I don't think the breakouts happened. I don't think you can necessarily look at a breakout based on results as much as process. It's sort of a mixture of both. So I don't like it. How are you playing 16 games and getting like two catches a week and calling that a breakout?
Because it's Gabriel Davis.
Sheehan, I'd like to let you know about an exciting part of the NFL season. It occurs after the regular season. It's called the playoffs, and that's how they decide who wins the Super Bowl. And those games are some of the best games that you'll get to watch all year. So I'd recommend checking them out. And Gabriel Davis, actually, I thought after that playoff explosion, I thought he was going to be much, much more expensive. I actually don't think the ADP is unreasonable right now, and I think it's going to get unreasonable. He's going in the best ball draft that I referenced earlier. He went at the 704. Yeah, realistic. That sounds absolutely fine.
That's pretty good. I'd take him there. I was thinking people would be having him in like the 4th and the 5th at this point.
I was too. Yeah, I was too. I just assumed that he was going to be like a 4th, 5th round guy, and I was going to not have any Gabriel Davis this year, but that's not been the case, at least so far. So I would recommend getting Gabriel Davis right now while he's not that expensive. Emmanuel Sanders is a free agent. Isaiah McKenzie is a free agent. There's going to be plenty of routes for Gabriel Davis in an offense that has 4 wide receiver sets pretty frequently, 3 wide receiver sets as the base. He had 2.03 yards per route run last year, including the playoffs. Highly efficient when on the field. He wasn't on the field nearly enough because God knows why, but they played Emmanuel Sanders over him for the majority of the season. That ended towards the end of the season. They also watched that playoff game. Maybe they'll never watch it again because it was so heartbreaking. But I hope they do so they can see how good Gabriel Davis was, because he looks like the kind of guy that could be a very, very strong number 2 option to Stephon Diggs. And once the ADP gets him to the 4th, 5th round, and we're basically like, now you have to have the out of him actually becoming the number 1 option, I'm going to be far less interested. But in the 7th round, where you're basically just hoping that he's not what he was in the playoffs, but he's just closer to what we were hoping he was in 2021 during the regular season, and just runs a bunch more routes. I think, it's kind of an easy pick, really, where he's going right now.
In his career so far, if he has played over 70% of the snaps, he has had over 100 yards receiving or a touchdown. And for some odd reason, that always happens in the playoff time, his rookie year and last year, where he has played a bunch and he has been incredibly productive. His best games of his career has been in the playoffs. Oddly enough, he does not get the playing time he deserves. I'm hoping they do not sign Emmanuel Sanders or McKenzie, making it so he has to by default be on the field. And if by default he is on the field, he will be a very, very productive fantasy wide receiver. And if he is going in the 7th round, yes, I will reach for him and take him in the 6th. I think that is incredibly fair for him. Especially if you look, I always recommend people do this. Go back to your last year's draft and then look at the people you took in that specific round and say, okay, he was a bust, he was a bust, he was a bust, he was a bust. Because once you go from the 6th round past, I'd probably say there's about a 70% chance that player did not stick around to your end of season roster. and chances are they were a bust. So if you're reaching after the 6th round, it's really not a big deal. I know the Yahoo little post-draft grade is going to ding you for it, and it's kind of fun to screenshot those and send it to your friends and say, hey, look, you got a D in your draft. But realistically, it's not going to matter when it comes to the end of the year. I mean, there's going to be a lot of Gabriel Davis talk throughout the year, especially once redraft season hits and we start hitting those mocks. So we're going to move on from him to Quentin Cephas. While he has probably one of the cooler names in the NFL, he's on the Lions, and you're not Amon-Ra St. Brown. Therefore, I don't care much. Mr. Pat?
Yeah, he was kind of an interesting prospect in that, he was a 4-year player who wasn't productive, so that's not good. But and he also bombed the 40, so you don't love that. But he was pretty efficient, and it kind of made him a little interesting to me. He hasn't been bad since he's been in the league. But you look at the Lions, and it's like the Lions know one of the things they have to do this offseason is get some receivers. I mean, Tyrell Williams and Rashad Perriman, they brought in as their outside wide receivers last year. That was, absolutely ridiculous offseason for them. They now have Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's going to be a feature in the slot, but they've got to get some outside help. So now you're worried about Quintus Cephas's routes, and not just his routes, but like, is he going to be the 3rd, 4th option on the Lions? No thanks. I do think from like a 28 round best ball perspective, like, deep dynasty kind of end of the bench type of guy, maybe, but I would actually be more interested in from the best ball perspective, where I don't expect Cephas to really become much, but maybe if, Amon-Ra goes down, they kind of botch the offseason again. I think he is a capable enough wide receiver to where, with a total lack of target competition, he can get like 6 targets. So, not like the worst, extremely late round dart throw.
No. I think it gets worse.
So Brown's kind of on his corner. They're like a big inside guy. I quite like to see Cephas as a prospect. I like that Okuda thought that he was the best player they'd come up against. He's clearly like very tenacious player, but I agree. He's on the Browns. They're not going to be like, he needs to be inside. He needs to be where on the Browns, the Saint Browns. That's how much. That's how highly I think of him. Yeah,
yeah.
I'm all about these.
I think he's finally outside. He has no speed. He has absolutely no speed, but he can be like a possession outside wide receiver, I think.
I don't think it's going to happen for him. I like him. I don't think he's going to be fantasy relevant, though.
No. I think he's going to be one of those guys that those deep sleeper, quote unquote, experts will write about and say, why you have to pick up this player because he's going to be your league winner in a year. Because one time in the season, he had 5 catches for 50 yards in a full point PPR. That was 10 fantasy points. Wow. And then, he's going to have that many. Here. Yeah. Where do you think it's coming from?
I know that everyone gets written about, but I don't think we're going to see Quintus Cephas league winner articles this year. I hope not. Please don't do it to us, fantasy.
Somebody gets injured, it becomes a bye week, and then you're going to see articles why you should pick up Quentin Cephas, or Quentin Cephas is going to be your waiver wire pickup of the week type of stuff. Yeah. Just don't do it. If somebody writes about Quentin Cephas, unironically, you should just unfollow them on whatever platform they are on. That's just it. It's, sometimes you got to be realistic with yourself, and people that says Terrence Marshall is going to be a breakout candidate, unfollow them. It doesn't matter. He's not. It doesn't work that way. Same with Quentin Cephas.
I think Quentin Cephas and Terrence Marshall should be top of the list in the.
I agree. If anyone writes about Quentin Cephas and Terrence Marshall, you got to unfollow.
Are we going to talk about Quintus Cephas again this offseason? I'll set
I really hope not.
The over-under at 0.5 that he comes up on any other podcast we do.
Over, because I will unironically mention his name as like a standard of like, oh, he's trash, he's Quentin Cephas, or he is, sorry Pat, you're not going to understand this reference, he is on the he who must not be named level.
I left him off this list because I didn't want you to talk about him this week.
I didn't want to talk about him.
Laviska Shenault.
Yeah, don't say his.
I will say in terms of like the waiver wire and stuff, though, I mean, please keep in mind how gross it gets. Like I think he's better off. You're better off with him than Josh Reynolds. You're better off with him than Khalif Raymond. I mean, some of these guys that we were like thinking about starting in showdown type of situation, Thanksgiving slates. But I actually do think that, like, as a Week 14 waiver wire edition, don't unfollow anyone who writes about him. That'll be totally fine.
No. This reminds me of a mini story. When during the of course the fantasy year, we do the live mail sack show, and a caller once called in and asked if they should start a tight end in their flex spot because they had a bad injury week as one of those bad bye weeks. And I told him I would rather leave my flex spot empty than put a tight end in there. And it's not like a tight end premium league. So it's just one of those things where I look back to and I think about, would I rather leave my roster spot empty than start somebody like Quentin Cephas? And that is a yes. I would much rather I would much rather leave it empty.
I started Quintus Cephas. I didn't start Quintus Cephas. He's on a few of my dynasty rosters. I started Khalif Raymond in a few leagues last year, and I started tight ends in my flex. So,
yeah, I start tight ends in my flex all the time. No, we're trying to win here.
I would never let that. I would never get it. It could be like Mark Andrews.
Bye weeks get tough, man.
No, it could be like Mark Andrews in my. I would still not do it. I could have like Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. I would no. I'm not.
Anyone drafting against you knows as soon as you take a tight end, you're not taking a second one. Then.
Yes, but I'm also on the boat. But I'm also on the boat of don't draft tight ends early. So everybody knows I would not have any of them on my roster. But anyway, enough storytelling. So Euro DPJ, I'm assuming it's Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Yeah, he's irrelevant. I don't care. He's almost on the level of Quentin Cephas.
I think that's
if you want to talk about who people are gonna. This is the guy that people are going to be writing about as a sleeper.
Oh God. Okay, I give them
100%.
a little bit more credit than Quintus Cephas, but I'm still like not on that train.
Gotcha.
Oh, the Browns need someone.
No,
They've
don't.
not got Odell Beckham Jr. They've not got Jarvis Landry, and DPJ is on the roster. They're not going to pay whatever Rashad Higgins is due. I quite like DPJ. I liked him coming into the league. I think he has an interesting profile of the sort of player that profiles to be productive for fantasy reasons. 35 catches, 597 yards, 3 touchdowns this year. Easily could have done more, I think, with slightly better quarterback play. And he's a guy who needs to, work on himself a little bit as well. Still a few too many easy drops, but this is, he's a high ceiling guy. And that's kind of what we want in these late fantasy rounds. He's had a couple of games over 85 yards. He had 4 for 101 and 2 against Arizona. That's exciting.
He reminds
me. He can do it in one play.
He can do it in one play. That I will give it. And he reminds me of the Michael Pittman Jr. type. As long as there's nobody better than him, he'll be all right. But as soon as they get somebody better than him, then he just most likely will fall back to irrelevancy.
But not only are they not going to get someone better than him, they're about to lose the guy better than him, potentially, in Jarvis Landry. So it's kind of a last man standing situation where like you're going to see a bunch of targets to Austin Hooper, I guess. And they got, Harrison Bryant. So the tight end, Njoku's a free agent, I believe. You got Anthony Schwartz, who really showed nothing. I mean, they're basically using him on jet sweeps just to get on the ball. Donovan Peoples-Jones, he was a boom-bust prospect, but athleticism was the reason to bet on him. And he has stuck around and now is about to, potentially get a lot more targets. You got to keep the price inexpensive with a guy like Donovan Peoples-Jones because to me, he doesn't profile as the guy who's going to become like a true number 1 wide receiver or even a really, really good number 2 wide receiver. But he definitely looks like the type of guy who could be just fine if they have no other option but to feed him. Kind of like maybe a poor man's Terry McLaurin type. And that's the situation that is developing here. Now, maybe they get a true number 1 wide receiver in the draft, but that might be okay for him because he's a deep threat. if they get someone that actually helps the offense move, and by that token, I think if they keep Landry, it'll be just fine for Donovan Peoples-Jones. There's just really no threat to him running a full slate of routes this year. And kind of like Gabriel Davis, where with these late round picks, it's like year one, they just have to force their way onto the field and show that they're going to be a part of the offense. Year two, it's more about establishing themselves. And then year three, I think you can see kind of an old school year three breakout with these 4th, 5th round picks like Davis and Donovan Peoples-Jones. So I'm not like overly excited about him, but I think he's a great late round pick.
Yep.
There's no way they don't get somebody. There's no way they don't get somebody. They need some. Baker needs help. The Browns need to make it so there's no excuse for Baker to fail, so they can move on from him. If they don't add anybody and they don't do good, then there's always going to be that argument that the Browns never did anything to help Baker Mayfield. They will add somebody.
What's the path though? I mean, there's a decent rookie wide receiver class. Please don't do it. I don't want to see any of these guys on the Browns, but they could definitely add a rookie wide receiver, but there's really no free agents. I mean, like Allen Robinson, that's not really going to cut it, I don't think.
Yeah, well, they're going to add Mike Williams. They already have Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Right.
The best result, I think, for DPJ is that he gets a few more high-value targets that maybe moves into the slot. Maybe he's not just a deep threat. They start using Anthony Schwartz more. As you say, they kind of just use him on screens and sweeps and wondering, well, you know exactly why you picked him, because he's incredibly fast. I said this last year. He's the guy from the Mighty Ducks who can skate fast and not stop. He's exactly that person. So maybe they want to use him downfield a bit more. Yeah, he's a late round dart throw. He's going to be on a lot of my teams, I think. Is the breakout going to come? Who's to say? But the pieces are kind of there.
Now, Pat, you mentioned he is kind of like a poor man's Terry McLaurin, but the way Terry McLaurin played last year, he might be a poor man's Donovan Peoples-Jones, who is actually an interesting. No, I'm kidding. But he is actually a person not on this list who really probably should be on the list that we have. I mean, Terry McLaurin had a phenomenal rookie season and a very disappointing sophomore slump. Are you still interested in him? What's his ADP? You have to imagine it's probably around the 4th round. Is that even worth it?
Yeah, I think that is where I think he's going late 3rd, early 4th. Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where you just have to bet on the quarterback upgrade. And again, a situation where I don't think they can do much worse than Taylor Heineke. I mean, we were kind of excited about Ryan Fitzpatrick there. He goes down less than one game we get out of him. And, it's Taylor Heineke the rest of the way. They were doing stuff. They were doing a lot of RPO. They were doing a lot of play action. They were doing a decent amount of passes on 1st and 10. Basically all the stuff that, I tend to look to be like, can you please do this? Because it generally leads to productive offense. And Washington was doing it, but they were doing it with Taylor Heineke. And, he wasn't the most inaccurate quarterback, but he was not efficient. A very, very limited quarterback, truly a backup level quarterback. He just shouldn't have been starting an entire NFL season. And that puts Terry McLaurin in a position where they have to do very little to get a sizable upgrade at the quarterback position. I think Jimmy Garoppolo would be a big advantage. They're one of the teams that, are kind of making noise about potentially trading for Watson. And I do think Watson will be traded to some team this offseason. So, they got Deshaun Watson, then Terry McLaurin would be a smash. But even if they get kind of anybody that's better than Taylor Heineke, which is basically anybody, I think Terry McLaurin will be worth his ADP. So I'm not hammering him in the late 3rd, but pretty easy to see a scenario where he ends up in like the late 2nd, early 3rd if they get that Watson trade, and then I think he probably doesn't fall all that much from here because. You're kind of already at the bottom of the barrel in terms of the quarterback situation.
As much as I like Terry McLaurin and the amount of dynasty leagues where I own him, a little bit of me wants them to not upgrade quarterbacks because I just hate the Washington Commanders. Sorry, that's the name now. I just hate the franchise in general so much. Like, I never wish them any success. So that being said, that's just like my personal vendetta against the team that I don't want them to have any success or a good quarterback. But That's my hot take and my rant for the day. Sheehan, do you have any closing thoughts?
I feel like McLaurin for me is going to be one of these guys like Allen Robinson, who for whatever reason just never finds his way into my roster. Like he's always too expensive, or there's a reason why. I like the guys around him more. I think he can't be quarterback agnostic because you would have liked to see him do more this year. But they have to add someone. As you say, there's going to be a better quarterback. There's going to be someone opposite him who does better. Maybe it's going to be more Logan Thomas. Maybe they're going to give the ball to Antonio Gibson. Who knows? So I'm not all out on Terry. He's never going to find his way onto my teams as far as I'm concerned, unless the arse really falls out of the market.
He did have last year 1.81 yards per route run, which is pretty decent. It's not bad. And, again, I think the situation was really bad. One thing that you saw with Washington towards the end of the year is that, well, really kind of from the middle of the year on, is that they went to a run-heavy team. And they realized, like, when they beat Tampa Bay, it's like, we just have to take the air out of the ball. That's our only path to victory. And they weren't, like, a truly terrible team. So they were trying to figure out any way they could to win games, and they realized it wasn't through the arm of Taylor Heineke. So I think that you could see additional passing volume if you get that kind of middle quarterback upgrade. Obviously, if you get the huge quarterback upgrade, you'll see a passing volume increase. But even if you get a small quarterback upgrade, I think you could see some passing volume added to the offense, because when they first went to Heineke, clearly the way the offense was designed to start the season was built around the pass. So I think that's kind of another small potential upside for this team if the quarterback play is at least competent.
All right. So, I mean, that's interesting. It's something we're going to have to be wavering and waiting for until we see free agency, of course, and then the draft. And then after that, I think we have a much clearer picture of what the ADP is for somebody such as legendary Terry McLaurin. His name, I've said it a couple of times, but his name reminds me of a Starbucks drink. That's my side note for the day. Another one for you guys. So let's try to march through. Yeah, I know it doesn't mean anything. Does it have any relevancy? No, but I feel like I needed to say it. So let's try to march through these guys here, because I think we're passing the hour mark. And of course, I don't want to keep Mr. Pat's time occupied. And of course, you viewers, I don't want you guys getting saturated with a bunch of information. So we'll try to march on through. So Marquise Callaway, I'll give you guys the floor, and I won't really put too much input on this.
Deontay Harris.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. I prefer. I quite like Callaway. I think maybe we've seen his ceiling in terms of 6 touchdowns. And I tell you what, if you like that exciting postseason football, let me introduce you to week 3 of the preseason. Marquez Callaway time to shine. Yeah, look, Callaway kind of is what he is. Looks like Thomas is coming back. I would rather Harris. I feel like I've been carrying that water for a little while now, so I'm not getting off the train as it looks like it's going to start to show up.
Who's that guy on the Steelers, the wide receiver that always has the massive breakout in preseason? You think, oh, it's finally his time to shine. Then he goes ahead and does nothing for the whole season, and then rinse and repeat next preseason. Washington.
Claypool.
No, James Washington.
James Washington is his name? Yeah, I think it's him. Or he's on the Steelers, and then all of a sudden he has a phenomenal preseason. But that's you kind of already know it's going to be that way. All right, Hollywood Brown.
Breakout's already happened as far as I'm concerned, but he left a lot of fantasy points out there this year. Left a lot of real life points out there this year.
A lot of drops.
He kind of is what he is. He's a deep threat. Mandrews is taking some of those high value targets. Your man Rashad Bateman is going to see more targets this year. High boom bust. I don't want to overpay for him at that value, but if he's say like in the 7th, 8th round, yeah, I'll take a look.
Yeah, no.
I'd rather bet on Rashad Bateman at cost.
Oh my god, yeah.
Bateman was just a tremendous prospect, and he wasn't all that good as a rookie, but he was kind of in the range where I'm doubling down on strong prospects. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins had a similar yards per route run as a rookie. You can get big, explosive year 2 breakouts even with what we saw from Rashad Bateman, as long as the guy's actually good. And I think Bateman's good. You have issues with, offensive volume, et cetera. So Bateman's not a sure thing, but he's cheaper than Marquise Brown. And with Marquise Brown, are you actually getting the guy who's the engine of the offense? No, that's Mark Andrews. And so if I'm not taking Andrews, I'd rather get the cheaper of the 2 wide receivers. And right now that's Bateman.
So we have this philosophy, me and Sheehan, we coined it, we invented it, we basically started it, where it's, when you have a wide receiving core such as last year, we were comparing it from the Niners to the Steelers and all that, where, when you have 3 similar comparable talents, you go with the cheapest option. And last year it was Deebo Samuel, it was Deontay Johnson and all that.
Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, that one was you. That one was all you. I give you full credit for Cooper Kupp because I like Robert Woods a little bit more. But in this case, this is going to be one of those few times where I disagree, where you don't go with the cheapest option because it's just Rashad Bateman. And I don't like Rashad Bateman at all. I've said this plenty of times where I don't like him. And
what about Bateman?
He doesn't fit the system. He does not fit the system. He is the exact opposite of what they need. They already have a possession receiver because they have Mark Andrews. They already have a deep threat because they have Hollywood Brown. They have a solid running game. They don't have a quarterback that can throw the ball properly. If Lamar Jackson was any other team, he would be labeled as a bust. He's just in a system that fits his skill set so well that he plays pretty decently at a semi-playoff level. And there just isn't enough ball to go around for Rashad Bateman. And we saw it last year. His realistic stat line is 4 catches, 50 yards, and maybe a touchdown. The only time he was fantasy relevant was when they got blown out against the Dolphins, and then I believe it was a couple garbage time throws late in the season with Huntley. So if that's the scenario, the game script that he needs to have in order to be fantasy relevant, then he's just not going to be fantasy relevant because that team's expected to win more games than lose, especially that division's getting a lot weaker now.
I do agree. I think the Ravens winning games and being a positive game script is an issue. You're going to have Dobbins back. You're going to have Gus Edwards back. They're going to be more run heavy than they were last year. And yeah, it did, for whatever reason, seem to have more of a connection, Bateman, with Huntley than Jackson. But I do think that, getting kind of a free look at a second-year breakout from a very, very strong prospect like Bateman, basically, this guy is what he is after year 1. Give me that all day. I think that, to Sheehan's point, Marquise Brown kind of is what he is. He was a limited player coming in. He's a pretty good player at what he does, but, he will leave some points out there. Bateman did not show what I thought he would as a rookie, but I think the ceiling is still very, very high on him as a player. And to me, very, very good wide receivers kind of make the offense. If Bateman is let's say Justin Jefferson was on this team, would we be saying Justin Jefferson doesn't fit the offense? Obviously Bateman's never going to be Justin Jefferson, but it's kind of like if you have the wide receiver take the step forward, the offense is going to shift to reflect that.
I always have, you have the philosophy that player talent kind of trumps scheme is what it seems like. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
To an extent, yeah.
I'm the complete opposite. You're in the NFL. You're already a talented player. It's all about the scheme at this point. Can you fit the scheme? And I just don't think Rashad Bateman does. I think Justin Jefferson perfectly fits the Minnesota Vikings scheme. That's why he is able to flourish like how he did. If he was on the Browns or the Ravens, if he was on maybe I
think if Justin Jefferson was on the Browns, we would think that Baker Mayfield was a Pro Bowler. I think that's how impactful a guy like Justin Jefferson is.
That's interesting.
I would take Bateman on 31 other teams. He was my wide receiver 2 in the class last year. Love what he's about, love his hands, but I'm with Nader. At a point, you get to the point where there has to be a fit. Otherwise, I feel like the fantasy community is littered with people who are so dogmatic and they've used their guys in college or, they know better than the coach. And I guess we had the other week, Alfred was saying at a certain point you got to bend your knee to the NFL. And I think this is a case where Bateman isn't going to be the guy that we want him to be. I do think there's a world where he replaces Hollywood Brown. But they like that deep threat element that he brings. So he's always going to be of a higher value, even if Bateman is notionally the wide receiver one.
Mm-hmm.
You do have with the Ravens the advantage to him being kind of the third option to start the year, which I think we would all agree he would be in this situation because the number one option is the tight end. There's not going to be a lack of routes for Bateman, right? Weirdly enough, there was a lack of routes for Bateman at times, not every week, but kind of like post his breakout. We thought, okay, here we go with Bateman, and then he'd have like a 60% route share. It was really weird. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think he'll be out there for close to 100, like 90+% of routes. He'll be out there, and they can do that because, in two wide receiver sets, it'll be Brown, Bateman, and Andrews. So that I think is at least a little bit of an advantage where it's not so much about the coach. He's still able to earn targets. And I think that's why I said that about Justin Jefferson. I think Jamar Chase had a huge impact on the Bengals, et cetera. Like, wide receivers earn targets. They get open. And if Bateman's able to take that step forward in this situation, even though it's not an ideal situation in many ways, he will be out there and he will have a chance to earn those targets.
Mm-hmm. One of the biggest complaints about somebody like Jimmy Garoppolo is he does not throw outside the numbers, and all his throws are, of course, in the middle of the field. And the only time that, what's his name? Sorry, it's eluding me now. Lamar Jackson throws outside the numbers is usually when he's rolling out. Obviously, it's a good sign to be able to roll out and, of course, stretch the field, exactly how play action and rolling out is supposed to do that. But if you're playing outside the numbers as a wide receiver and it takes that much effort and scheming into putting it in a way where you are able to throw the ball, then I feel like that's also a little bit of a red flag. Of course, I might be wrong. If Lamar Jackson takes a little bit more of a step, which he has progressed and improved himself throughout his career, which so it makes it so I'm not 100% away or against Rashad Bateman or Lamar Jackson or that offense. I'd be fine to admit that I'm wrong. I just rather
we'll see, because Bateman just wasn't as good as I thought he would be as a rookie. I honestly thought he'd be better. So that's the thing. It's like maybe I'm just wrong about how good Bateman is. But one of the things I liked about him was that he played out of the slot as a junior. In his final season, he played out of the slot. And prior to that, Tyler Johnson was playing that role. Bateman was on the outside. I think that, you could see Bateman out of the slot in three wide receiver sets. You could see an offense that's built around Bateman as the number one wide receiver, I think would have him moving inside and out. That was part of the appeal of his prospect profile. So, again, I agree that Baltimore is not an ideal passing game situation. I agree that Lamar Jackson has his faults. And I agree that Mark Andrews is the number one option here in this passing game, but I still do see upside for Rashad Bateman.
There we go. That one I could agree with. I think his touchdown upside could be the significant play for him, especially once you start getting to bye weeks and injury plays. I think Rashad Bateman will have a realistic stat line of about 5 catches, like I said, 50 yards, and then a touchdown. And if he does that, that's a phenomenal fantasy day. If not, then you have 5 catches, 50 yards. If you're playing half-point PPR, that's almost 8 points. Full-point PPR, you're scratching over the 10 mark, which isn't that bad from a fantasy perspective. It's really not that bad. In that case, I'd probably have somebody like Elijah Moore, but that's a debate for a different time. All right, so that's enough on the Browns. We have Alexander Madison. He is last on the list, and then of course we will say our goodbyes. Personally, I think he's the best handcuff you could have. Other than that, I think that's kind of where he's labeled.
Yeah, the question for me is, can he do it somewhere else?
Is he a free
agent?
agent?
Is he? He's not this year.
I think this is last year.
But for me, is this like a Burner Turner situation where he's going to go somewhere and be more value? Because if I was the Bills and wanting to upgrade my running game, he might be a name that I'd try and throw a draft pick at to get on my roster. So I guess the question is, does he have standalone value beyond this season?
It's so situation based because I think he certainly could. I think he's probably as good as Josh Jacobs. He's better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire in my opinion. He's a solid running back.
Not difficult.
Yeah, I know it's not that difficult, but that's a lead running back still, unless McKinnon's re-signed and takes that role fully. But yeah, I mean, like I think he's pretty similar to Josh Jacobs, a pretty similar skill set. He's elusive, doesn't have that much breakaway speed. He's a competent receiver, not a great receiver. The type of guy that if you want to just plug him in, he's probably better than Devin Singletary. But it's so much about like, do the coaches trust you? Do they trust you to know the pass protection? Are you going to get someone blown up? Or are you going to screw something up? And so if he changes teams, that's obviously not ideal. I think the ideal situation maybe would be if Cook were to leave but I don't know. I think basically he's probably just a handcuff that has a lot of value. I was drafting a ton of him last year. I think he was my highest rostered running back in best ball, just because I thought he was just way too cheap in the 13th or 14th round. And I do think he's a very, very strong handcuff. He's a pretty talented back. He's not nearly as good as Dalvin Cook, in my opinion, but when he gets a chance, he's like he's like kind of plugging in like a 5th or a 6th round pick type of running back.
I think that's giving him too little credit. Usually when Dalvin Cook's out, I think Alexander Madison gets must start category.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're right. It's probably underselling him, although it might be a little different with Mike Zimmer out of town this year. So,
true.
But you're right. That's underselling him just because they were just feeding him last year.
Yeah. So he's in the Tony Pollard level of handcuff this year. I think next year, looking at teams where he might go to, I think that's where it really starts getting interested for Alexander Madison. I think you mentioned the Bills. That would be nice. I doubt he goes to a team like the Niners, even though that'd be interesting. I could see him going to the Rams if they don't fix the running back situation. I could see the Rams trading for somebody like Alexander Madison if they don't fix the running back situation, or if they don't think Cam Akers will be healthy and consistent throughout the career.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
I can't think of too many.
One that doesn't sound good at all, but that might actually be good in 2023 is the Jets. The Jets.
Okay. I can get behind that.
Michael Carter fails this year as a starter. Zach Wilson looks somewhat competent, or at least approaching competence, and they make some improvements to the offensive line. It's a similar scheme. It's the Shanahan scheme over there. He's coming from the Kubiak tree, which is where we've seen him have the most success. So, it would be a scheme fit, and maybe it's an offense that's like on the rise enough to just kind of feed a running back.
Mm-hmm. That one I can get behind. I like that one a lot. That would be a lot of fun. Let's see. He is 23 years old. Okay. So he's got a lot of juice still left in him. All right. So, I thought, maybe by the time he gets the starting caliber or the starting opportunity, he might be a little bit old. But no, if that's the case, he's going to be 24, 25 at that point. Dalvin Cook is surprisingly only 26 now that I see it. Now, he's the same age as Najee Harris. Najee Harris is 23. All righty. Okay. So that's interesting. And that's a point and note to take. But that's going to be enough for this list. We can go on for a lot of players, a lot of different topics, and a lot of different situations and scenarios. And we could be opening the conversation for any of these players and keep adding points and points and points until we all turn blue, which I personally wouldn't mind. It's interesting and entertaining to trash talk a player because I think it's entertainingly fun. But we're going to have to wrap up this episode. So, of course, Pat, I appreciate you coming on, potentially some short notice, having to deal with me, having to deal with Sheehan not having an internet connection for a part of the episode. So why don't you let everybody know where they could find you and what you're all about?
Yeah, well, you guys gave me plenty of notice. Credit to you guys. I don't want the listeners to think it was short notice. But yeah, you can find me at NBC Sports Edge. I've got articles coming out on the wide receiver rookie class. I'm working on articles on them right now. And I'm also doing a podcast on Thursdays, diving into the offseason and the rookie class. And this Thursday, post-combine, we're going to be discussing I'm going to be discussing with Eric Froton from our college football team the combine results from Thursday and getting into some of the prospects in depth. Check out last week as well. I had Travis May on from RotoViz, and we talked all about the rookie class. We literally did an overview of the entire rookie class. So that's on A Good Football Show. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And then Ship Chasing, obviously, Wednesday nights, 9:15. We just we do some drafts, we drink some drinks, and we should talk running backs.
There we go. That's always fun. Now, to be fair, Sheehan is the one that gave you the long notice. He does all the logistics behind the scenes stuff. So you have to give Sheehan credit. I just come here and I sit here, look pretty, and I shit talk a couple players. That's all I do. That's my job. Sheehan, he let everybody know where they could find you real fast. I'm sure everybody already knows.
Well, I was going to say, before we do, we missed wise words of wisdom, Pat. We asked all our guests this. What is the one piece of advice you would have to make our listeners better fantasy football players?
Well, so like for this time of year in particular, or at least, this is kind of topical to this time of year. I do think, draft rookies right now. If you're doing dynasty startups, I was listening to actually Travis May's podcast, College of Canton, and they're Devy guys, and they're kind of very dismissive of the idea of drafting, doing dynasty drafts before the draft. I love it. Because I don't have the time to actually dive into Devy, but I think it's kind of fun to, if you've got the research, you can do your dynasty draft before the NFL draft and really take advantage of that research. But if you don't want to do that, if that's like kind of a little too hardcore, you still have these rookies in the best ball drafts right now. And I think you're getting some great prices on these rookies. There's a few rookies in particular who stand out. I think David Bell is a great value right now. I think Sky Moore is a really strong value. I think George Pickens is a really strong value. You got some strong upside bets at the running back position where you're seeing Breece Hall. I think at a pretty decent ADP. I think he's a pretty low risk bet with some upside, but you're also seeing Kyron Williams, Rashad White. I think Walker and Spiller are also pretty decent bets at their ADP. So I would say, you don't want to load up. You don't want to go crazy, but to get a couple of these rookies in any best ball draft, pre-NFL draft, it feels risky. You're taking on some uncertainty, but you're also getting a lot of upside. And compared to where a lot of these guys are going to go post-draft, and particularly July, August, once the hype machine really gets going, you're just not going to see them at anywhere near their price. And I would include even a guy like Garrett Wilson, who everyone knows is going to be a high draft pick. He's going at a significant discount to Treylon Burks. That doesn't make any sense. Garrett Wilson will probably be drafted first. And, he right now is also a really strong value. So that would be, something just to mix into any best ball draft you're doing. Any of these rookies that have a decent chance of going high in the draft, have good profiles, mix them in.
Now, I've always said it, you are a sociopath if you draft rookies before the draft, especially before the combine. Holy, that's like a new level of sociopath. That's like almost.
But this is why, no one wants to do it. No one wants to do it. Anything that no one wants to do that, over a large sample is going to yield profit is something I want to do.
God, that's like I said, you're on like a new level of sociopath. That's almost like serial killer level. And people that do redraft drafts before preseason. That's also another level of sociopath, because like you having the confidence to draft a team knowing none of them are going to get injured in preseason. That's another level. Of course, it's like playing Russian roulette. And of course, when you do draft before that and somebody does get his best running back or first round running back injured for the rest of the year, he definitely gets roasted hard in the group chat. But that is going to have to wrap up this episode. But of course, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you would like to subscribe and review the favorite podcast platform that we currently on and give us a nice 5-star rating. But other than that, make sure to follow us on Twitter at SleeperWire Show to stay updated with all news articles and podcasts. But other than that, hey, good luck, everybody.
I'm ready. I'm ready for